tell him that, hey, you know, he tried to throw James down a flight of steps in Jerusalem and kill him. He was always after the apostles. He hated them. And it's clear through his writings. I think the funniest thing, his obsession with the male penis, his obsession that Peter and James were spying on him to see if he was circumcised. In one book, I think it's 1 Corinthians, he states he was circumcised on the 8th day after being born. And then in Galatians, he says he was never circumcised.
Yeah, that's typical, you see.
Yeah, he can't get anything straight. He says he lies not. God knows I don't lie. And then talks about and boasts about how everything abounds through his lies.
Yeah. He does. He says two opposite, and then you get these people that say, "Well, I think what Paul is really trying to say." Well, if Paul was really trying to say it, he'd say it.
Yeah, I mean, he says exactly what he's saying. No one's mistranslating him because he's writing his own material.
Yeah, and he was good with language.
That's why I told the Messianics. I said, "Why do you spend so much time trying to rewrite Paul and clarify what he's really saying, and just drop them all together?"
See, and with Paul, where do all the miracles and tongues and all that? It comes from Paul.
Yeah.
And what does Jesus say about all these miracles and stuff? I mean, this is like Antichrist material. This is how he's going to prove to the world.
If the Antichrist comes, Satan is, and we know he's a smooth talker because even the angels wouldn't talk with him and stuff. Can you imagine? I mean, if all these people, Christianity in general, has been so deceived by Paul over all of their lives, over past 2,000 years for the movement itself, the church itself. Can you imagine when Satan comes and he's even better than Paul? Because you know how good Paul is. It takes you a long time to really just sit and line all his stuff up and really look at it, because you don't catch it right away.
But with Paul, I mean, okay, the apostles laid down like how you were an apostle is because you were taught by Jesus several years face to face. You walked with him, you learned from him, and ate with him, and you were a disciple. That was the foundation of apostleship. But then Paul comes along and says, "I had a vision," just like Benny Hinn.
Yeah,
I had a vision. You dare to question me?
A divine revelation out in the wilderness.
Yeah, which is contradicted, 3 different times in Acts.
Well, in the initiation rites of Mithraism, there's one of the initiation rites has something to do about being blinded by a light. And he just kind of incorporated this whole, because Mithraism back then within the Roman government was like Freemasonry of today for us. They were all involved with this Mithraism. And Paul's father was a Roman government official. And I've always said, I can never prove it. I think at one point I almost had the proof that Paul was directly sent in by the Roman government to infiltrate and destroy Christianity. He had never left ties with the government. He always claimed his Roman citizenship whenever he was in trouble and being persecuted as a Christian. He never claimed, never called out for the Lord for his help, as the other apostles did. He would claim his Roman citizenship. In other words, hey, I'm a government spy here. Leave me alone.
And when he got in trouble, literally hundreds of troops, Roman soldiers, appeared and helped him.
Yeah, well, what the Bible code says, his death was a lie. And so I always think he lived out his lie in some villa in Rome somewhere, probably with Bin Laden. Probably getting the place ready for centuries later for Bin Laden and Saddam Hussein. His Bible code was trying to, and he also has a lot of UFO activity in his code that I never even posted. I believe that the light he was blinded by was a UFO, because look, he says scales had fell off his eyes. That the snake scales. Why would the Lord's light singe your eyes? When everyone who said that it's a bright light, but it didn't hurt their eyes. But when Paul sees him on the road to Damascus, it gives him scales on his eyes. It sounds more like radiation burning.
Well, I think when Paul had a problem, when he had a problem with the apostles, because he was always, I have revelation and I hear audibly from God, and I mean, it must have worn pretty thin with the apostles. Apostles clearly did not accept him, and threats were placed on his life by new converts and stuff, and he was literally ran out of Jerusalem. Yeah, well, they always claim that one phrase in James, or Peter, where he calls them brother. I'm like, that's not calling him an apostle. He wasn't a brother. He was a Benjamite. He was an Edomite, but he was a Benjamite. Well, brother is just a respectful term.
Yeah, and it's also, that's very loosely in Hebrew language when a brother can actually be a brother or a cousin. There are a number of things that the Hebrews throw under one term like they normally do with terms.
And then when he's cast out of Jerusalem, I mean, there was people in Acts who swore to not shave or eat or anything until they saw his death.
Yeah,
and then, so there goes Paul's market. So what does he do? Oh, the Gentiles!
Oh, yeah, I'm called to the Gentiles.
Bring in the pagans and all their pagan worship, and they just have to say they believe in Jesus, and we'll all hug them,
And when it was Peter that was called to the Gentiles, not Paul. Paul had to pick up the market because the Jews wouldn't accept him.
Well, what's that? I didn't quite hear again.
So, Paul went to the Gentiles because the Judahites then at the time wouldn't accept him. So he went to the Gentiles. Peter, and we argue about this some else about Peter being called to the Gentiles, being called to preach to the Gentiles. And the Lord said on his faith the church would be built, and I really don't think that the Lord was talking about a Sunday church system.
No, Peter wasn't the first pope. I mean, that's...
No, he wasn't. I mean, he wasn't even in... wasn't in the Peter that they can't even place in Rome?
Yeah, they tried to place him in Rome, but it doesn't work.
Yeah.
The Vatican's been trying to do this for centuries.
They try to fix their theology around any little doctrine they're trying to promote at the time.
But what Paul does is he mixes Mithraism with Christianity.
Yeah, and that's how
and then it becomes very palatable and very, open for all the pagans to come in with all their pagan worship.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Oh, okay, I can call Mithra Jesus, no problem. And then Mithraism is the foundation of Catholicism.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the next, if it wasn't for Paul, I mean, I don't know where Catholicism would have been.
I always see his name in end-time events associated, and I don't know, forget that, if it wasn't for the fact that they were supposed to have these two witnesses, and I don't know if they're literal coming back, you would think Paul himself was coming back to play the role of Antichrist, because you always see his name in end-time events, the name of Paul, and it's associated with Christianity. And I think it's just all the deceptions of Paul, why people are going to be so deluded. And because we're already in errors with Paul over all these centuries. They're all expecting the prophesied events of the last days to happen in a certain format. I don't think they are. I think the things that do happen are going to take a lot of people by surprise.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I think the basic things will.
The thing with Paul is that he says, I have a miracle. God spoke to me. And I'm an apostle because I do miracles.
Mm-hmm.
He re-emphasizes that over and over, because I do miracles, that I am an apostle. Well, that's no proof. We're not to look to miracles. I mean, we're to look, the words of Jesus and the prophecy, and there's no mention in prophecy the 13th apostle was coming.
Yeah, he said to watch out for the one coming in his own name.
And Paul did come in his own name.
He said, watch out for the leaven of the Pharisees.
And then he changed his name because I guess it was just, he was becoming a political hot potato.
Yeah.
So he changed it so that people wouldn't go, oh, you're that guy. Let's run him out of town again.
Yeah, he was Saul of Tarsus when he was working for the scribes to go after and destroy the Christians. They couldn't beat the Christians. I've read historians, and I don't know if you have too, that stated at that time, during the time of Christian persecutions, that the town of Damascus was a safe haven for Christians. So why would Paul be on his way to Damascus to collect Christians to throw them in jail when Damascus was a safe haven?
And Tarsus was the center of Mithra worship.
Yeah, Mithra worship, and that was huge back then. It's the same thing today as Freemasonry is with our society today.
Oh, easy.
And his father being a government official, and they never talk about